What is going on, guys? DragonTamerBlayde here, back with some more Elder Scrolls Legends, and today we have some more Alliance War card reviews to do. I'm trying to catch up, and I'm falling behind, so we might be doing these like every single day. So thankfully we've got some stream content, so you guys can still get some gameplay as well. But before we get on into things, if you guys are new, if you're new to TESL or new to the channel, we do upload at least once a day, pretty often twice a day on the channel. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Follow me on Twitter and Twitch. Links are in the description below. I like hanging out with you guys, so more I get of you guys, the better. But let's get on into some card reviews. First up, we've got Covenant Masterpiece. I think this is Daggerfall Covenant. It's an 8-cost item with Mobilized, Breakthrough, Regenerate, Guard, Ward, and +3/+3. So obviously this is just like a smattering of keywords on this thing. Mobilize, for anyone who's new to Alliance War, the keyword Mobilize means if there are no applicable creatures of yours in your lane that you are equipping this item, you can spawn a 1/1 token in order to equip the item too. So if you have an empty lane, you'll spawn a 1/1, and then it'll drop it down. It'll be a 4/4 with this item and all those keywords. This card's a little complicated, because on one hand, this is a very, very, very good card. Mobilize is a flexible keyword. Breakthrough is a pretty good keyword. Regenerate is, despite it being horrible on most cards and in most situations, Regenerate's one of the stronger keywords in the game. It just doesn't really have many applicable creatures, and getting Regenerate onto things, there's just, I don't know, there's a lot of hard removal as well. So Regenerate doesn't really see its potential. Guard is pretty good, and Ward is obviously really, really good. And +3/+3 is about 3 to 4 magical worth of boosts. So we'll try and break it down that way. So there exists a red item. It's the, it's like the Orcish Warhammer, I think. 4-cost 3/3, +3/+3 with Breakthrough. So looking at just the stats and the keyword, that is 4 of the 8 cost. So then you're paying an extra 4 for Mobilize, Regenerate, Guard, and Ward. It's weird. Like, I think this is a perfectly fine cost for the amount that you're getting. But on the same, thread, I don't think I ever want to play this in my deck. And if I do play this in my deck, I kind of want to discard it so that Master of Arms can just equip it for free. I don't ever want to pay 8 to equip this. Even with the flexibility of Mobilize, I don't think I want to pay 8 for a 4/4 Breakthrough, Regenerate, Guard, Ward. Yeah, it's going to be one of those things where Merrick got buffed and Hrothgar Forge got buffed, because this is a huge addition for them. If you can find a way to get it from the discard pile and equip this for free, I think this feels less bad. But yeah, it's one of those cards where I don't think you ever really want to play it from hand. Maybe a different deck comes out where this can kind of shine a little bit more. But honestly, even if I could get this onto like a Gardener of Swords, so it goes onto both of them, I don't think this is necessarily worth the risk. And despite these keywords all being super powerful, if I was going to spend this much on a item, I almost think I would rather run like Ancestor's Battle Axe instead. So maybe there's something I'm missing with this card, or some use that makes it feel a little bit better. Because like I said, I think the card is fairly costed, and I think the card is very powerful. I just don't ever really want to play it from hand. So for that reason, I'm going to give this card 1.5 stars. I can see the argument for 2 as well. It's one of those things where I think some items decks with a fair amount of discard can make this happen. Just not too often in general. Next up, we've got Vanis Galarian, an 11-cost 3/3. I think this is the Daggerfall Pact or whatever. Not the Daggerfall, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to do some studying. But 3/3 with Expertise. Deal 3 damage, gain 3 health, and draw 3 cards. For Expertise, if you guys are not already aware, Expertise triggers if you play a action, item, or support, I believe. At the end of your turn, your Expertise effect will trigger. So on turn 11, you'd have to play Vanis and a 0 cost, or turn 12, obviously, a 1 cost or 0 cost. And Expertise can trigger every turn. So, what do you got here? You have an 11-cost 3/3, which obviously is pitiful stats for the cost. But with the Expertise, if you trigger it even once, dealing 3 damage, we've already seen, is Crushing Blow. And Galarian can go face. It can also be used to control the board. So you're getting a 3-cost Crushing Blow there. 3/3 stats is about 3 cost, maybe 2.5 to 3 cost. So we've got 6 of the 11 cost accounted for. Gaining 3 health. We have Healing Potion, which is 2 Magicka with Prophecy, gain 5. So gaining 3 health in general is probably worth 1/2 to 1 Magicka. And draw 3 cards is probably worth 5 to 6 Magicka if we're being real about it. So again, if you trigger the expertise once, I think Vanis Galarian is perfectly fine cost-wise and very, very strong. Obviously, this guy can just get insta-removed. However, I think there's going to be a fair amount of decks where you're not playing him for the body. You're playing him for what is essentially remove a creature, heal for a little bit, and draw 3 cards. Like, you're paying the 11 or 12 Magicka just for that. And then if you happen to keep this guy alive and you get to trigger it a second time, then it becomes nuts. So that's kind of my judgment for this card. You can't play this card and kind of just hope that it survives. You have to have a 0 or 1 cost card in hand ready to go to trigger this. Otherwise, it's just a huge risk, and it's more than likely going to die because it only has 3 health. But if you can guarantee you trigger this at least 1 time, I think this is a really, really good card. And I think that if you're playing this card, it's a little awkward, because I feel like the kind of deck that you're going to want to run this in is going to be some sort of control deck. And control decks don't always run a ton of low-cost cards, but you could have something like a Raiding Party or anything like that, Firebolt, in there for Vanis. It's complicated. I think there's going to be a card that people just find a way to make work, just because being able to get guaranteed 3 cards of draw and healing for 3 and probably removing a creature is too good not to build your deck in a way that you can take advantage of it. You can't completely build your deck around this card because it's a tricolor and it's a single legendary, so you can't really build your deck around 1 in 75. But if you build your deck in such a way that at all times you should have a way to trigger this guy, it becomes really, really nice. So I think power level alone, this is a 4-star card. It's going to be solid in resource extension. However, there is quite a fair amount of resource extension for it to already compete with. Notably Namira's Shrine for almost endless value. But I think this card is good enough that it'll find a way to eke it out in a lot of situations. Next up, we've got Orsinium Forge. It's a 5-cost support with 3 uses and the ability activate, equip a creature with a +1/+1 Orsinium plate, then increase the power and health of Orsinium plates that it equips by 1. So, in just a raw usage, you equip a 1/1 item, a 2/2 item, and a 3/3 item. That's not that good. It's in very slow support. You need to probably at least get to the 3rd use before this even breaks even value-wise. And support removal is so incredibly common in this game right now that you can't really count on it. And there's not a ton of decks that really run supports like that. The best case scenario for this card would be if something like Support Crusader popped up. And I know people have messed around with Support Crusader before because you still got your Tower Alchemist and your Cauldron Keeper from yellow that you get to run. However, most of the times just Support Mage is strictly better, and in general, support decks in general have just kind of fallen out because of the aforementioned super easy, accessible, and cheap support removal. So I don't have a lot of hope for this card. If we get to a point where support removal kind of falls out of favor and isn't run as commonly, I could see maybe some sort of use for this strictly in something like a Support Crusader deck. I don't think many decks are just going to run this without support synergy, because hoping that your support lasts 3 turns and getting a total of +6/+6 stats out of it, I don't think it's always going to be that useful. I know you can run multiple of these, but like, I'd rather just run like a bunch of Steel Scimitars or Steel Scimitars and Dagoth Daggers. I don't think this card is that great. I'm sure somebody will find a way with Tower Alchemist and Cauldron Keeper to buff this up a bunch of times over and over and over again. And some people may get the idea that this card is stronger than it is. But at the same time, if you're going to play Orsinium Forge, why not just play like Volderung or some other buffing support or items like that. I'm going to give this card 1.5 stars. It's not completely dead and useless, but it's pretty damn close. This might be the worst card we've seen revealed so far. I don't like to just completely write cards off. I think if you guys watch this, you know that I always try and find some sort of use for this card. But this card has a uphill battle before it can be like really quality. Next up, we've got Fighters Guild Elite, a 5-cost 2/2 with expertise, double Fighters Guild Elite's power and health. Did we talk about this one yesterday? I don't know if we talked about this one already, so I'm going to talk about it again anyway, just in case, because I know there was another card that I talked about yesterday, but I'm getting a little confused and a little unorganized, so we're going to talk about this anyway. Fighters Guild Elite is a 5-cost 2/2 with expertise, double Fighters Guild Elite's power and health. I'm starting to feel like, as I'm saying this, I feel like we talked about it. So forgive me if I talked about it already. Expertise, as I mentioned before, triggers if you have played an item, action, or support this turn. So you're never going to play Fighters Guild Elite on 5. You're going to want to play him, well, I guess you could play him on 5 if you have stuff ready. But a more typical scenario would be play him on 6 with a Steel Scimitar, and at the end of the turn, this guy goes up to an 8/8. This is one of those cards that kind of needs to be answered, which is kind of what a lot of the red cards seem to be this expansion. These kind of like big aggro / mid-range threats that need to be answered or they can snowball out of control. And we've gotten a whole bunch of them, so it's going to be tough to have enough removal to answer all of these cards. So I think this card is pretty strong. Obviously, it needs a deck that runs enough items to really buff this. Because even if you play something that's not an item, like an action, I don't want to have to wait till the end of the turn to trigger this to have it become a 4/4. You want to buff the stats so it doubles into something at least 6/6 at the end of the turn. Like, so you need at least improvised weapon on this guy to make him even remotely worth it. But if you have an item ready and you can equip it right away, this guy becomes very deadly. Again, he's pretty vulnerable to silence, vulnerable to most, all hard removal and a lot of other removal. And it requires a multi-card setup to be properly powerful. So if you put multiple cards into this guy and it gets instantly removed, it kind of feels more bad than if you played just one regular big threat and it got removed. Because then, in this case, let's say I play Fighters Guild Elite and a Scimitar and it gets hit with a Javelin. I invested 2 cards to get an 8/8 and my opponent removed it with 1. So that's a feel-bad scenario, but again, Red's getting enough big threats that are must-answers that I think you probably could get away with setting this card up. But just because of some of those weaknesses that I mentioned, I don't think you can go fully in. I'd be curious if I did talk about this yesterday, see if this rating still stands. But I'm going to give this a 3.5-star rating. I could push it towards a 4, but I'm going to go 3.5 just because of... It's not like it's only vulnerable to silence. It's vulnerable to a lot of things, and it takes a multi-card investment in order to really see the fully power realized. Next up, we've got Pact Shield Bearer. It's a 4-cost 3/5 with Veteran. Your opponent's actions cost 4 more next turn. So again, Veteran, it requires you to attack and survive either an opposing creature or your opponent's face. Doesn't matter. You just have to survive for Veteran to trigger. So I kind of go back and forth on this card. Like, on one hand, it has 5 health, which means it survives Lightning Bolt and it survives Crushing Blow and all the early game removal options, which is good. And it's kind of snowbally. So let's say I'm playing against Tribunal Control. If Pact Shield Bearer swings even once, even one time, barring Prophecy, you may just lock your Tribunal opponent out of the rest of the game. If you've ever played Withered Hand Cultists against Tribunal Control, it is not uncommon for them to play a 4-cost Sorcerer's Negation or a 6-cost Lightning Bolt or something crazy like that just because they have no other options besides playing a creature. So, or playing an action. So if they don't hit a Prophecy, if you swing once with Pact Shield Bearer, you can keep him alive every single turn since your opponent can answer, and every single turn their actions are going to cost 4 more. So I think on one hand, if this plays against an action-heavy control deck, and it survives 1 turn, you can potentially just win the game. However, in other situations, if you play this on turn 4, and your opponent has the ring, on their turn 4, they can silence it, they can hit it with a Javelin, they can hit it with an Edict. It's still vulnerable to removal for this 1 turn that it needs to survive. That's probably what makes it balanced. And also, the attack stat is a little bit lower than my liking. If this was a 4-cost 4/5, I think I'd be all over this card because it could trade pretty well. However, the 5 health should make it to where the Veteran should trigger if it attacks. It's just probably not going to kill most of the 4-cost creatures that it attacks into. So I think this is a quality card. You're going to see some times if you play an action-heavy deck, you're just going to get completely blown out by this card. However, the lack of really offensive stats and the need for it to sit for a full turn and survive before you can get any value out of it kind of sour me on it a little bit. But I do like that cards like this are being printed to try and kind of combat Tribunal Control's power. I'm just not super confident. Honestly, anytime I drop something on turn 4 against Tribunal Control, I'm expecting an Edict or a Javelin. But also, this isn't a super high value card for you, so if you drop it and hard removal is used on it, that is one less piece of hard removal for the rest of your deck. Honestly, I just consider this card a really strong supporting member of a deck, and that's kind of the definition of a 3-star card. I think the card is strong. It'll probably be quality in Arena. Not great, but not spectacular, not horrible. And I think it'll be the same thing constructed. Mostly dead-ish against opponents' decks that aren't action-heavy. Can sometimes win you the game against Tribunal Control. And it's a really strong target for buffs, since the health is a solid number. And if you put any more attack into it, it becomes better. So I think this is a definition of a 3-star card. And finally, I don't think we've talked about this card yet. Lyra's Titan Board. This card is terrifying. 6 cost 5/5. It's a Nord and a Giant. At the start of your turn, destroy your opponent's front rune. So, if this sits on the board for a turn and it has the ability to attack, it is dealing 10 damage that turn. And what's scary about that is, let's take the raw scenario. You're at 30 life. Lyra survives. She destroys your front rune. That brings you down to 25 life. She can also attack. That brings you down to 20 life. If you cannot destroy Lyris, next turn, at the start of the turn, you're down to 15 life, and if she swings, you're down to 10 life. So if she survives for 2 turns, you are almost completely dead alone. That's not all. In order to destroy a rune, it will bring you down to whatever health total it needs. So even if you have no runes broken, and you healed to 1,000 health, if Lyris survives, you will lose all of your health to bring you down to 25 health. Yes, you will lose 975 health at the start of your turn if you healed up to 1,000. And that's not all. There is more. Because this is a common situation for aggro decks. Let's say I'm playing red aggro, and I bring you all the way down to 4 health. And then, you used all of your removal, and you healed up back to 40, and you answered all of my threats, and now I'm top decking, but you're out of removal. So you have 40 health, no runes, and we're both kind of desperate for answers. Normally, this is where aggro just loses. However, if you have no runes left, and you drop Lyra's Titanborn on the board, and she survives until your next turn, and your opponent has no runes, it does not matter how much health they have, you win the game. Yes, you win the game. It is insane. And yes, obviously this card is vulnerable to removal. It is vulnerable to silence. But aggro has had no way to win the game unless your opponent was at like 4 health and you were top decking and you top decked a charger. Like, if you didn't get all the way through, aggro had no help once your opponent stabilized, because there is no way that you could push for enough damage and draw enough cards and generate enough value and resources to continue to push that damage to win. Now they have a 1 card I win button, which if you spent all of your removal answering all of their other aggro threats, you might not have any left for Lyris. Which means if you're playing the reactive deck and you're going to have in the back of your head, my opponent may be playing Lyris, I need to stick, kind of hang on to this Javelin, or I need to hang on to this Silence. You're going to hang on to a piece of removal, which now you're not using to answer their current threats. So it's just, it creates a mind game where you either use all of your removal answering their threats and you have nothing left for Lyris, or you save some removal, which means maybe you're leaving a Mournhold Trader or something on the board that you otherwise would have removed, and now it's going to push for that 4, 8, 12 extra damage that it would have just been removed. This card is so incredibly strong. It is so good. I don't care that it gets answered by hard removal. It is a 1 card I win button. Like, oh my god, this card is so good. This is a 5-star card. I don't care about removal. I don't care. I don't care that it gets silenced. It doesn't matter. This card can just win the game. it can just win the game. It's a little scary because if I'm playing like a creature-heavy mid-range deck and you drop Lyra in the shadow lane to hide, I can't just remove it. I'm going to need like creature abilities that can target it and stuff like that, or I need to run more actions. This card is terrifying. This, oh my god. I already hate this playing against this card, and I haven't even played against it yet. I can't wait to see somebody on Reddit have like 500 health and just insta-lose to Lyra that they can't answer. This is going to be absolutely insane. Sorry, I got hyped up, but this card is one of the strongest cards we've ever seen. The power level of this set, in my opinion, is just through the roof so far. This is a scary, scary set. But that's going to be it for now, guys. Let me know what you guys think and what your ratings would be down below in the comments section. As always, thank you guys all very much for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.